We tend to think of research as this super sterile, totally objective process, right? But what happens when we remember that it's all done by, well, by humans? Turns out, every single researcher brings a hidden personal element to their work, and that is exactly what we are going to unpack today.
So let's try a metaphor. Picture this. Every researcher carries an invisible backpack. And no, it's not for their notebooks or their recording gear. This backpack is filled with something way more personal, something that actually shapes every question they ask and every conclusion they end up drawing.
All right, so what's actually in this thing? It holds 3 key items that quietly influence the entire research process. So come on, let's open it up and take a look at the first one. First up, we've got preconceptions. The best way to think about these is like a pair of tinted glasses that every single one of us wears, whether we're a researcher or not.
Okay, so right off the bat, let's be clear. Preconceptions aren't automatically a bad thing. In fact, a lot of the time, our past experiences and beliefs are what get us curious in the first place. An economist might spot a market trend that a sociologist would totally miss. They help guide our questions, they help us see patterns. The real danger, though, is when we forget we're even wearing these glasses.
And this quote just nails it, right? It perfectly illustrates the risk. I mean, if you're wearing blue-tinted glasses, you might completely miss all the subtle shades of red or yellow right in front of you. Unchecked preconceptions can seriously narrow a researcher's vision, making them overlook any data that doesn't fit what they were already expecting to find.
Okay, the next thing we're pulling out of the backpack, well, this one's a bit heavier. We're talking about prejudice. And this thing acts as a really powerful and really unfair filter on everything we perceive.
The key thing to get here is that this is way more than just a simple expectation. Prejudice is what happens when those preconceptions harden, when they turn into rigid stereotypes. For instance, a researcher might subconsciously interview a male CEO with way more respect and deference than a female CEO. It's a prejudgment, and it totally distorts the analysis and leads us to devalue certain voices.
And this is the really scary part, What this quote highlights so well is that prejudice doesn't just color what we hear, it can completely silence people. It's the mechanism that decides, often without us even realizing it, whose story is worth listening to and whose can just be ignored.
And that brings us to the third and final item in the backpack, which is often the most invisible of them all, privilege. This is the unseen advantage a researcher carries with them, and it's tricky because a lot of the time, we don't even know we're carrying it.
I mean, just think about it for a second. A researcher's identity, their race, their gender, their background, it immediately creates a power dynamic. Who do you think participants are more likely to trust? Who gets the in with certain communities? And whose final report is going to be seen as more credible by the big institutions? All of this is shaped by the researcher's own social position.
This is so important because privilege doesn't just affect the analysis at the end of the project. It affects the raw data itself right from the start. The stories a participant feels safe enough to share with a researcher from a similar background might be completely different from the stories they'd share with someone else. Privilege fundamentally shapes the very knowledge we're able to collect. So we've unpacked the 3 Ps: preconceptions, prejudice, and privilege. Which brings us to the big question: what are we supposed to do about them? I mean, we can't just leave the backpack at home. The solution is learning how to carry it responsibly, using something called a reflexive toolkit. For a long time, the goal was this idea of impossible neutrality, pretending you could somehow just empty your backpack completely. But now we know it's impossible. The real goal, the more ethical one, is what we call reflexive transparency. This isn't about getting rid of your biases. It's about being open and honest about them and acknowledging how they're influencing your work. It's not about ditching the bag. It's about carrying it openly. So how do you actually do that? Well, it boils down to 3 really simple but powerful steps. First, you have to name them. You've got to acknowledge your own assumptions, your own position. Second, you check them. You challenge your own interpretations with outside eyes. And finally, you balance them. You actively work to share power in the research process itself. So let's break that down. To name them, a researcher might keep a journal to really dig into their own assumptions. To check them, they can get colleagues to review their work, or even better, go back to the people they studied and ask, hey, did I get this right? Is this your story? And to balance that power, they can use collaborative methods, inviting participants to help analyze the data, basically turning them into partners in the research process. And this quote just brings it all home, doesn't it? The power of this kind of work is because it's done by humans. Our intuition, our experience, those are assets. The challenge isn't to become a robot. It's to be an honest, self-aware human who carries their baggage openly and with a sense of responsibility.
So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. Whether you're a researcher, a student, or just someone who's trying to critically consume information, which of these 3 Ps, preconceptions, prejudice, or privilege, do you think is the one we most often overlook? It's a vital question because understanding what's in that backpack is the very first step toward a more honest search for truth.